welcome back to the Life in Listings podcast. Today I have John joining us. Hey, John.
Hey, how's it going, Jennifer?
Pretty good. I'm excited about our conversation today.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
Anybody that is listening in that has not met you yet, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, where you're at.
Yeah, so I'm John Tiller. I'm out of Richmond, Virginia. I've been selling real estate here for 25 years, last 25 years. In that time, kind of in the beginning, I got in a great coaching program, and the end is that I am team leader here. I have a co-owner who I do some coaching with and who really runs the team. And we do investing, and we also have a brokerage organization that we're part of. But the primary thing that I do is coaching for mega team leaders who either have or are growing toward a mega team and want to grow that further, really scale their business. And most of them, what I find is that they want to get their time back.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing with most of my time these days.
Well, tell us a little bit about that journey. How did you start? How did you become successful? And then, now mega teams is your thing. So tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah. So, like many of us, I got into real estate almost by accident. It was not my first career. I was in banking, and my regional bank, my boss's boss said, "Hey, great news. We're going to give you a promotion." This was a little over 25 years ago. We're going to give you a promotion, which I needed because my wife was pregnant with our first child, and we both wanted her to stay home with him. And so I thought, okay, well, that's great. What's the catch? And he said, well, you're going to have to move to Atlanta, which is about, several hundred miles south of us in a completely different market than here in Virginia. And I said, well, okay, I guess I got to do what I got to do. And I called a friend, to the only guy I knew who was selling real estate. And he said, hey, you ought to, while we were signing a listing agreement, he said, you ought to stay here and sell real estate with me. Well, I ended up staying here with the bank. That's a little bit of a story in itself, because we didn't want to move our new family away from our existing family. But that I could never shake the idea that this guy said you'd be good at selling real estate. And so September 11th of 2001 was my last day of salaried employment when I got into real estate. And which was also my 27th birthday. And as we kind of watched the towers fall there and wonder what was going to happen in the world, I just felt this crazy peace about real estate's the thing. Like, it's the thing that I should be doing. And I got in a great coaching program. And a few years later, because of that coaching program, just have always believed in great coaching. And I wanted to imitate the best coach that I could find. And we built a great team. It was one of the leading teams in our market. Then I wanted to get into maybe coaching some agents. And so I became a broker owner, and I did that for 13 years. And then about 7 years ago, in that 13 years, we built 3 offices with 120 agents in those offices that I owned and operated. And learned a lot along the way there, had a lot of coaches, a lot of other coaches along the way, a lot of mentoring along the way. I'm really not a very smart guy. I just know how to duplicate and how to innovating is, I like to innovate now that I've done it for a while, but it took me a very long time before I did anything that wasn't something that somebody else had shown me. And about 7 years ago, I had a competitor in my market. We were friends, both running real estate teams, and he introduced me to a new brokerage concept and joined the brokerage with him. But what was more fun was that his team was selling about 200 homes a year, and I joined his team. He continued to own it, and I kind of embedded myself, if you will, as his general manager, and we grew that to about 500 sales a year, from a kind of a smaller mega team to a larger mega team, and learned a lot along the way. And as we were doing that, I had all kinds of team leaders across the country that were asking me, hey, John, like, how do I do what you do? Like, this specific question, or in general, they would ask. And so that's how the coaching journey began there. There's a lot of what I think is different about what I learned as a coach, kind of in the middle of that story. As I first got into real estate a couple of years after that, September 11th, 2001, my family had a really horrific tragedy where my son had an accident at our home. He fell from a second-story window when he was 3 years old in 2003 and crushed his skull on the driveway there, and my wife found him laying there bleeding from the head. It was horrific, and she called 911. We med flighted him to the local university hospital, and for about 3 weeks there, we didn't know if he was going to live. And I was still early in my real estate career, and thankfully he did live. We're so grateful. He's 25 years old now, and he has a lot of disabilities from that accident, but there's nothing broken about his spirit, and he's living with us for the long run now because of those disabilities, and he's just a joy to have around. But what I realized pretty early on back then in my career was I didn't just want a career where I was slinging houses. I needed to make money because I knew that my son would need me for the long term, right? We would need to build some kind of trust fund for the long run. So making money was important, but really it was about making an impact and leaving a legacy for me, both through my son and also just making an impact on a daily basis. And so you fast forward to around 2011, actually to be exact, May 18th of 2011. And my wife and I have this crazy story of doing some quiet time on our own. Faith is a big part of our life, and we both felt like we were being called to full time, temporary maybe. We didn't know if it was going to be temporary or not, but to full time travel the country sharing our story of hope after tragedy, after this tragedy that had happened with my son, because we'd spent a lot of years just doing everything we could to get him well. And there's a lot of stories within the story there. And so in 2011, for 2 years, I left real estate. I still owned the brokerage, and but had a broker in charge who ran it for me. And we traveled the country and we did speaking events all over and really impacted lives. There was never a dry eye in the house when we did those events. But like Brian Buffini likes to say, Eli likes food with his meals. So I came back to real estate in 2013, and really every day that I was doing ministry full time, I was missing real estate. And every day that I was doing real estate full time, I was missing ministry. And finally, a good friend of mine said, John, don't you understand that real estate is your ministry? And that's my way to make an impact. We get to sit as agents, we get to sit at the kitchen tables of people who aren't going to their pastor or their church or even to their friend's house or their family to tell them what's going on that's causing them to sell the house. Sometimes it's joy, but sometimes, I mean, we all have crazy families, right? And so sometimes they're the stories that we hear when we're in people's homes, helping them deal with the biggest financial transaction of their lives. We have an opportunity to make an impact right there. And I'm a little ashamed to say that I was probably 15 years into the business before I really saw it that way, that was what my purpose on this earth is, to make an impact in people's lives. And as I started to approach it that way, my business grew even more, became more fun to do. And as we started coaching agents and team leaders, really kind of the difference there was on making an impact and leaving a legacy. We're in a powerful, powerful business where not only do we get to have this inside scoop into people's lives that other people will never see. They're not talking to anybody else about. And so we have an opportunity to be an encouraging word or give an encouraging word to them, and sometimes to be a shoulder to cry on, but also to be a facilitator of making an impact in their lives financially through real estate. I mean, we all know that 90% of the wealth in the world is created in real estate. And so if we can help people do that through whether it's investing or whatever, there's that opportunity too. So I feel like I turned 50 a little over a year ago, and we've been married for 30 years now, and feel like I'm kind of in the second half of life now. And I really feel like I want to make sure that I don't end up 20 years from now looking back and thinking, man, I should have been doing something different. And I think there's a lot of people, whether they're 50 or they're 20, they want to make an impact. They want to leave a legacy. They understand that this business is about way more than, or they understand life anyway, is about way more than making money or slinging a house. And so that's what I'm excited to do. And I feel like I'm living into the reason I was put here to do it.
I mean, that's amazing. I feel like anybody that has the opportunity to really tap into how they truly feel or why they feel they're on this earth is amazing. And you get to do for work.
Right,
Like,
right.
like hardly anybody gets to do that. So then in your coaching, you're helping these individuals tap into that also?
Yeah, so that's really the starting point, right? The big question is how do we get where we want to be when it comes to our business? And what I found is that there's a lot of people, I don't think it's unique to real estate, but it certainly happens in real estate where we're just so overwhelmed from giving and spending our time, and people are successful agents. They understand that the formula is work hard and you get results, right? You make contacts, you get, it's not really rocket science, right? You talk to enough people about real estate, you're going to have a stellar real estate career. And certainly there are tools and tricks and tips to expand that ability to make money in real estate. But what if we all looked at our business? What if we started by looking at a kind of a personal playbook of, well, what do we want out of this? What do we want 20 years from now? What do we want 10 years from now, 5 years, 3 years, next month? What do we want? And even 100 years. I had a friend that challenged me in a coaching program I was in. It was a very high level investing mastermind and coaching program from a 38-year-old multi-billionaire with a B who was all in real estate that he was teaching on. And he talks about, what do you want your life to look like 100 years from now? And, we think about, I don't know if I'm going to be around 100 years from now, but with biotech happening the way that it is, maybe we will be. But the question was more about, what are you going to be remembered for? Right.
Mhm.
And what are people going to be saying about you because of what you did now? What are people going to be saying? How are they going to be impacted? Not so much about your reputation and what they think about you, like who really cares what they think about you, but how are you having an impact on their lives? And it's just the power of intention. It starts with being intentional about what you want to do both today and in the future about having an impact and making a legacy.
I feel like that's really powerful because more often than not, what I see is a lot of agents and team leads. I mean, it's not just like day one, you got your real estate license. There's a lot of team leads too that they kind of fall into this profession. They maybe at first didn't have a real intention of it being a big business. And all of a sudden they've got this team or they're selling real estate and they never really thought even 6 months down the road, 5 years down the road. Most are not thinking 20 years down the road, right?
That's right.
And so I do think it's the legacy part of it, but it's also the business part of it. Like, are you thinking how this is going to benefit your family, yourself, however you want your life to grow in these different increments in time?
One of the things I love about your podcast, Jennifer, is you talk about life and listings, and it starts with life. It's not listings and it's life and listings. And what so many people don't realize, certainly we want to think about the future. It starts there, thinking about what we want for the future. But the truth is that if your real estate business is jacked up, it's probably not actually your business. Your life is probably jacked up. And so looking at, right, looking at the rest of our lives, when things are going well with the rest of my life, it doesn't matter how bad. If I'm on point with my faith and my family and my finances and my freedom and fulfillment of life and what it feels like, I can lose a listing appointment and it's no big deal. But if all that other stuff is broken, my marriage is broken, my kids hate me, I'm financially broke, all the things in life that are beyond today's business, that makes the pressure it's going to be really hard to handle a bad listing appointment or losing the listing, right? And so one of the things we also talk a lot about is really whole life coaching. And certainly as a business coach, people come to me, and I know in the consulting that you do, they come for improvement of their business. However, a lot of times that starts with being realistic, and leaders, the first thing they do is they define reality and then they chart a course for the future. And most people aren't honest with themselves about defining today's reality. Most of them don't take an inventory of how they're doing in all of those areas of life. And that's a great way to start and really realize, maybe I have a client that I was coaching right before this call, netting over $1 million a year, and is absolutely exhausted, just doesn't know and is really having a hard time keeping up, a hard time meeting his family obligations, a hard time meeting the expectations that others have of him outside of his business, and he's just completely beat up. And that's what we're focusing on.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why we started this podcast, because that story right there is so common. Like,
Yes.
so common. I remember having a conversation last year with a woman, and I don't even remember who it was. So if you're listening, I'm sorry, I don't remember who I was. But I remember her telling me these stories about how every night she puts her kids down and then she just sits there next to her husband and she works for hours every single night. That's how she runs her business. And I'm like, okay, how's your relationship with your husband? Like, how is that? And maybe that's fine for both of you, but is that really a long-term thing that you want to continue to happen?
That's right.
Or what if you get hurt? You weren't able to go send out these contracts at, 10 o'clock at night or whatever.
That's right.
It's like, do you really like? She's like, well, no, I don't, but it's just how it is. That's how I get my business done. I'm like, man, you get burnt out. And that's why you hear so many people in this profession either leave or they move into other careers, because we've all been kind of trained that,
Yes,
work works. Yes, that's how a lot of us become successful.
sure.
But you don't always have to be working 90, 100 hours available 24/7. Like, you need to have other goals and priorities in your life. Otherwise, you're almost always going to get burnt out. There's a few wonky ones that for some reason that's what they like. But
Well, and there's a lie out there that you can't have it all. And the truth is that if you're intentional about it, you can have it all. You just have to work on the thing that needs work on now. And sometimes it's your business. If your business is new, or if you've decided to go to the next level, you're a successful agent, you've decided to grow a team or a brokerage, then hey, of course, you got to put in more work in the early months and even years sometimes. But that's not a forever strategy. There should absolutely be a strategy where your business is working for you instead of the other way around. And when that's happening, you really can have a strong family. You can be a great spouse. You can be a great mom or dad, a great parent. You can be a great friend. You can also, with financial stability, there are all kinds of things, that generosity, that many people who are wired to be good real estate agents, they have generous hearts. They're generous people, but their finances aren't straight. They're not managing their money well. And managing that money well, I can't tell you how many agents I've met that are making $700,000 or $800,000 a year who owe the IRS 500, 600, $1 million at 500, 600,000 or $1 million that they're on a payment plan for, because they just kind of stuck their head in the sand and said, well, income's going to solve that problem. And we all know that eventually that comes back around. And so it's about identifying what you want, and it's about doing the hard work on yourself so that you can get there, to get that balanced life that you're looking for. And maybe balance isn't the right word. Maybe integrated is a better word. I can be passionate about what I'm doing for work, and at the same time, be a great dad, be a great husband, be a great member of the community, whatever that means for me personally, and kind of live into that purpose.
I like the word integration. I know that everyone uses balance as like the work-life balance type thing. And I do think like maybe that works for like a 9 to 5, where really just
Maybe.
having like work-life balance, you can actually log out. But I think for an entrepreneur, I like the integration part. I mean, for me, like, my kids get involved with that stuff. I talk to them about it. They're involved in the conversations. They come down here, they help me scan paperwork. Like, they're starting to learn certain things, and I could see them being involved in it in the future. And that makes it more fun for the family. Like, okay, if I got to go travel and speak or do something, the kids are excited about it. And, I brought them a couple times or whatever. And it allows for better integrations, because especially as an entrepreneur, you're usually building something that you're really passionate about. You want your family to be excited about it too. You don't want them to hate it.
No, 100%. And sometimes that has to do with time. Sometimes you can, it's a gift to be able to integrate your kids like you are kind of in the day to day. And then sometimes, like with my son, like he's just not, we could probably find something that he's competent to be able to do, even with his disability, but he's got no interest, man. He's like, real estate, that's fun, Dad. You talk about that. Baja, you talk. But it allows, he knows, and they know because I set expectations with them, my wife and my son, about when I'm going to be home and when I'm going to be working. And I never break those expectations. If there's anything I can consciously do about it, I've certainly made mistakes and had to apologize for that. But when I say I'm going to be home, I'm home because my family is more important than my business. My business is for my family, not the other way around. And my son has got this really cool story. When he was 3 years old and he was on the hospital bed and we're praying for him to survive, 3 years old is an age where you wonder, okay, are they old enough to take him to Disney yet? Or are they not old enough? Or what do we do? And so we said, if he survives, we're going to take him to Disney. And so we took him when he was 4 years old and we called it Eli's Victory Trip. And he had a blast. He had so much fun. We just got back from Eli's Victory Trip number 7. And he's been going this whole time. And let me tell you, man, I could go to Hawaii. Your family and my family could go to Hawaii for the price that we spend, for the amount of money that we spend at Disney. But there's so much joy that's found there. And so, no, it's not about the money, but money's important, man. It's kind of like oxygen, you need it to operate. And there's some freedom that financial freedom, there's some time freedom that financial freedom can buy you.
Yeah. We just took the girls for their first Disney trip ever for like their
Oh.
fifth and I think we took them for their 5th and 7th birthday. No, 4th and 6th. There was multiple times where someone handed me a bill and my husband was like, "What?" And I'm like, "I got this."
Yep.
You don't even want to know.
You don't even want to know. You don't even want to know. And I told my wife, I said, just give me the big number before we go. My wife's great at details and budgeting. And so she's like, well, do you think it'll be okay to do this little thing or that little thing? I said, just put it all on there. Tell me what the big number is. We're going to pay for it ahead of time. And then we're just going to go have a blast. And that's because our business works for us, right? And we can do that. And so everybody in real estate should have that story. If you don't have that story today, that story can be your story in the very near future if you'll just face it, deal with it, get a coach. There are financial coaches. There are different coaches for different things, or a mastermind or a book. If you can't afford a coach, then get a book. Like, books are amazing, right? Podcasts, listen to the podcast and just take action and you'll get there.
There's so many free tools that you can start with, so you don't have to recreate the wheel. And then you can build up, because I do think everyone should talk to a coach at some point for whatever you're focusing on. There might be different coaches over your lifetime. I mean, I've had various coaches that help me on different things. And right now, my focus right now is fitness. So I've got a fitness coach. Like, they're all different things that you can focus on and help you in your...
My coaching program for team leaders is not inexpensive. And when people ask me about, what do we do? And we deep dive with folks, I tell them, if you don't need a team leader coach, you need some kind of coach. I have 2 coaches right now. To your point, I've got a health coach because I can't seem to get over this kind of one barrier that I'm trying to get with my health and my fitness. And I also have a marketing coach outside of real estate. And the bigger my business gets, the bigger my coaches get. Like, my coaches are very, very impressive in what they do. And I couldn't imagine not having a coach who's smarter than me, better than me, and faster than me in the things that I want to get smarter, better, and faster in.
Amazing. Well, I'm going to pivot a little bit. We're going to ask our icebreaker questions. So,
okay,
John, what would you say your superpower is?
Yeah, so this is going to sound like a cheesy answer because we just talked about coaching so much, but it really is investing in others, kind of listening to what their need is, kind of taking away all the distractions and identifying what their best next step is. And when I got into professional coaching, I've been coaching, well, I guess, for a very long time, hundreds of people. But when I was looking at, hey, kind of what's next, as I told you about entering halftime and the second half of life, and what should I do next? And I asked my friends, people who know me really well, and I asked them what to do. And I asked them, what do you think? And they're like, well, whatever it is, it's got to be some form of coaching, because it's people feel heard when they're in front of you. And to me, that's an extraordinary gift. Like for somebody, including on this podcast, for somebody to give us your time, then that's an honor. Like that's the biggest honor you can give me. Time's the only finite resource, right? Like you can go make more money, you can't make more time. And so for people to give me their time, it's an extreme honor. And I'm grateful that that's the superpower, is to be able to help people kind of cut through the noise and figure out what the next step is. And sometimes it's just, in fact, most of the time, it's just listening to themselves talk. It's so awful how nobody listens. Like nobody listens. And so a lot of times coaching is just listening to people, letting them talk out their own solutions, which by the way is the same. It's also the number one critical skill in winning listing agents, is that they sit at the table and they don't verbal vomit what they can do and how they're the best agent in town. What they do is they sit down and they listen, they ask effective questions and they listen. And so I think that's my superpower. I hope that it continues to stay effective.
That's amazing. Well, it's a perfect superpower. I mean, I'm sure it was really effective when you were selling real estate, but now coaching, I mean, that's definitely a great superpower. And I think that's funny to say, like, all it takes, not all it takes, but a lot of what it takes when you're going through coaching is just like probably listening to yourself work through a problem or say it out loud. I say a lot of times to any of my CEOs that I work with, a lot of
Yes,
times we're working on them first. Like
absolutely.
you have to learn about how you communicate and how you do things before you're effectively hiring people and bringing on people to the team. Because if you don't know anything about yourself, it's really hard to have all these other people around. You don't have any self-awareness. So super great. Well, John,
Know thyself is an
right?
old adage that seems to still be true.
It so is. I'm like, we're working on ourselves first, and then
Yes,
we're going to train the team and do all these things, right? We need
that's
to
right.
understand you first, and then we can
Yep.
work on all of these other various projects.
One of my favorite quotes is, "Don't wish that things were better, wish that you were better."
I like that. That's great. Well, John, this has been a great conversation. I feel like there's so many little nuggets all over the place for anybody that's listening in. If they're an agent or a team lead or even just an entrepreneur, I feel like they can get some inspiration. If anyone wants to reach out and get more information about your coaching, or if they just want to follow you anywhere, where's the best place to send them?
Sure, yeah. So we've got some podcast listeners here, of course, and so really privileged to be here with you. If you want to hear Jennifer again, you can come over to our podcast at Mega Team Mastermind, Real Estate Mega Team Mastermind. We also have a health score, a free tool to help you evaluate the areas of your business that need work. It's kind of for those of you who are familiar with operating systems like EOS or 4DX or Patrick Lencioni's playbook, we developed the assessment straight for real estate out of that. So that's a free tool anybody can use. That's at megateamhealth.com. And if you want to reach out to me directly, all of my contact information's at johntiller.me, all of my socials and everything else. You can probably just find me by searching there. But if you can't, it's all at johntiller.me.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. This has been great, and we'll talk again soon.
It's been a gift. Thanks, Jennifer.
Bye.